Well, I'm sitting on the Thames and it's a glorious sunny afternoon. You might call it a golden afternoon, and it's therefore very appropriate for that golden afternoon on which Alice and her sisters took a rowing expedition from Folly Bridge to Godstow. I've been sitting at various spots on the Thames reading from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and I'm now at the most comfortable I've found so far, since it's provided with a seat, and that's the four-way river junction, four rivers or four streams, with the Thames going south in that direction, Sheepwash Channel over there. An added bonus because Kier Construction have finally reopened the path to Jericho on the left. And the Thames going north there. So I'm going to sit here and enjoy myself and read the next excerpt from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And in case you've missed my introduction to these, there are numerous editions, and I'm using that which is the classic text annotated by a maths populariser called Martin Gardner. And the maths bit is significant because Carroll was a logician as well as a mathematician, and he puts quite a lot of logical jokes into his stories. It's also worth noting that the stories contain a lot of puns, so if something doesn't seem to make sense, think whether it could be a pun, because that's difficult for me to convey in speech rather than in text. So I'm now going to read the second chunk of chapter 4, The Rabbit Sends in a Little Bill. And Alice has been through a number of adventures, including getting immersed in a pool of tears, which she wept when she was much bigger, and meeting a lot of strange animals, a dodo and various other birds, and so on, and then frightening them off because she keeps enthusing about her cat and the way that it kills birds, which they don't seem to be very keen on. And just after all those animals have departed and Alice is on her own, she sees the white rabbit again, and it seems to think she's his housemaid. And while she's carrying out an errand that it gave her, thinking she was its housemaid, she comes to a little house. She knows it's the rabbit's house because it's got the name W. Rabbit engraved on a brass plate on the door. So she goes into the house and she finds another bottle. Unlike the bottle she originally found after falling down the rabbit hole, this one doesn't say "drink me," but she's used now to things that she eats and drinks changing her size. So she uncorks it and drinks it anyway, or drinks from it anyway, because she knows it will do something to her. And it makes her really big. And before she's drunk even half of the bottle, she finds her head pressed against the ceiling of the house. And she's just growing and growing and growing. And she's just growing and growing and growing. And in order to fit into the house, she sticks one arm out of the window and 1 foot up the chimney. Luckily, she doesn't grow any bigger, but she's pretty uncomfortable. And she's talking to herself because she doesn't have anything else to do. And then she hears a voice outside. And this is where I ended. Mary Ann, said the voice. Fetch me my gloves this moment. Then came a little pattering of feet on the stairs. Alice knew it was the rabbit coming to look for her, and she trembled till she shook the house, quite forgetting that she was now about 1,000 times as large as the rabbit, and had no reason to be afraid of it. Presently, the rabbit came up to the door and tried to open it. But as the door opened inwards and Alice's elbow was pressed hard against it, that attempt proved a failure. Alice heard it say to itself, "Then I'll go round and get in at the window." "That you won't," thought Alice. And after waiting till she fancied she heard the rabbit just under the window, she suddenly spread out her hand and made a snatch in the air. She did not get hold of anything, but she heard a little shriek and a fall and a crash of broken glass, from which she concluded that it was just possible it had fallen into a cucumber frame or something of the sort. Martin Gardner explains that a cucumber frame is like a tiny greenhouse that you grow cucumbers under in the English climate. Next came an angry voice, the rabbit's. "Pat, Pat, where are you?" And then a voice she'd never heard before. "Sure, then I'm here. Digging for apples, your honour." "Digging for apples indeed," said the rabbit angrily. "Here, come and help me out of this." Sounds of more broken glass. "Now tell me, Pat, what's that in the window?" "Sure, it's an arm, your honour." "An arm, you goose? Whoever saw one that size? Why, it fills the whole window." "Sure, it does, your honour, but it's an arm for all that." "Well, it's got no business there at any rate," said the rabbit. "Go and take it away." There was a long silence after this, and Alice could only hear whispers now and then, such as, "Sure, I don't like it, your honour, at all." "Do as I tell you, you coward." And at last she spread out her hand again and made another snatch in the air. This time there were two little shrieks and more sounds of broken glass. "What a number of cucumber frames there must be," thought Alice. "I wonder what they'll do next. As for pulling me out of the window, I only wish they could. I'm sure I don't want to stay in here any longer." She waited for some time without hearing anything more. At last came a rumbling of little cart wheels, and the sound of a good many voices all talking together. She made out the words, "Where's the other ladder? Why, I hadn't to bring but one. Bill's got the other. Bill, fetch it here, lad. Here, put 'em up at this corner. No, tie 'em together first. They don't reach half high enough yet. Oh, they'll do well enough. Don't be particular. Here, Bill, catch hold of this rope. Will the roof bear? Mind that loose slate. Oh, it's coming down, heads below." A loud crash. "Now, who did that?" "It was Bill, I fancy." "Who's to go down the chimney?" "Nay, I shan't. You do it." "That I won't, then." "Bill's got to go down." "Here, Bill. The master says you have to go down the chimney." "Oh, so Bill's got to come down the chimney, has he?" said Alice to herself. "Why, they seem to put everything upon Bill. I wouldn't be in Bill's place for a good deal. This fireplace is narrow, to be sure, but I think I can kick a little." She drew her foot as far down the chimney as she could, and waited till she heard a little animal, she couldn't guess what sort it was, scratching and scrambling about in the chimney close above her. Then, saying to herself, "This is Bill," she gave one sharp kick and waited to see what would happen next. The first thing she heard was a general chorus of, "There goes Bill!" Then the rabbit's voice alone, "Catch him, you by the hedge." Then silence, and then another confusion of voices. "Hold up his head. Give him brandy. Don't choke him. How was it, old fellow? What happened to you? Tell us all about it." Last came a little feeble, squeaking voice. "That's Bill," thought Alice. "Well, I hardly know. No more, thank ye. I'm better now. But I'm a deal too flustered to tell you. All I know is something comes at me like a jack-in-the-box, and I goes up like a skyrocket." "So you did, old fellow," said the others. "We must burn the house down," said the rabbit's voice. And Alice called out as loud as she could, "If you do, I'll set Dinah at you." There was a dead silence instantly, and Alice thought to herself, "I wonder what they will do next. If they had any sense, they'd take the roof off." After a minute or two, they began moving about again, and Alice heard the rabbit say, "A barrowful will do to begin with." A barrowful of what? Thought Alice. But she had not long to doubt, for the next moment a shower of little pebbles came rattling in at the window, and some of them hit her in the face. "I'll put a stop to this," she said to herself, and shouted out, "You'd better not do that again," which produced another dead silence. Alice noticed, with some surprise, that the pebbles were all turning into little cakes as they lay on the floor, and a bright idea came into her head. "If I eat one of those cakes," she thought, "it's sure to make some change in my size. And as it can't possibly make me larger, it must make me smaller, I suppose." So she swallowed one of the cakes, and was delighted to find that she began shrinking directly. As soon as she was small enough to get through the door, she ran out of the house and found quite a crowd of little animals and birds waiting outside. The poor little lizard, Bill, was in the middle, being held up by 2 guinea pigs, who were giving it a drink out of a bottle. They all made a rush at Alice the moment she appeared, but she ran off as hard as she could, and soon found herself safe in a thick wood. "The first thing I've got to do," said Alice to herself as she wandered about the wood, "is to grow to my right size again. And the second thing is to find my way into that lovely garden. I think that will be the best plan." It sounded an excellent plan, no doubt, and very neatly and simply arranged. The only difficulty was that she had not the smallest idea how to set about it. And while she was peering about anxiously among the trees, a little sharp bark just over her head made her look up in a great hurry. An enormous puppy was looking down at her with large round eyes, and feebly stretching out one paw, trying to touch her. There's the enormous puppy. "Poor little thing," said Alice in a coaxing tone, and she tried hard to whistle to it, but she was terribly frightened all the time at the thought that it might be hungry, in which case it would be very likely to eat her up in spite of her coaxing. Hardly knowing what she did, she picked up a little bit of stick and held it out to the puppy, whereupon the puppy jumped into the air off all its feet at once, with a yelp of delight, and rushed at the stick and made believe to worry it. Then Alice dodged behind a great thistle to keep herself from being run over, and, the moment she appeared on the other side, the puppy made another rush at the stick, and tumbled head over heels in its hurry to get hold of it. And then Alice, thinking it was very like having a game of play with a cart horse, and expecting every moment to be trampled under its feet, ran round the thistle again. Then the puppy began a series of short charges at the stick, running a very little way forwards each time and a long way back, and barking hoarsely all the while, till at last it sat down a good way off, panting, with its tongue hanging out of its mouth and its great eyes half shut. This seemed to Alice a great opportunity for making her escape. So she set off at once and ran till she was quite tired and out of breath, and till the puppy's bark sounded quite faint in the distance. And yet, what a dear little puppy it was, said Alice, as she leant against a buttercup to rest herself, and fanned herself with one of the leaves. I should have liked teaching it tricks very much, if I'd only been the right size to do it. Oh dear, I'd nearly forgotten that I've got to grow up again. Let me see, how is it to be managed? I suppose I ought to eat or drink something or other, but the great question is, what? The great question certainly was, what? Alice looked all round her at the flowers and the blades of grass, but she could not see anything that looked like the right thing to eat or drink under the circumstances. There was a large mushroom growing near her, at about the same height as herself, and when she had looked under it, and on both sides of it, and behind it, it occurred to her that she might as well look and see what was on the top of it. She stretched herself up on tiptoe and peeped over the edge of the mushroom, and her eyes immediately met those of a large blue caterpillar that was sitting on the top with its arms folded, quietly smoking a long hookah and taking not the slightest notice of her or of anything else. And there's the caterpillar. The annotations point out that the illustrator, Tenniel, has ingeniously used two of its legs as its nose and its chin. So that's the end of chapter 4. Next time round I'll come to chapter 5, Advice from a Caterpillar. See you then.